If you think you've already seen the biggest military surprises of 2025, think again. Because what I am about to show you will flip your entire understanding of global power upside down. This isn't coming from a superpower, not from a nuclear giant, not even from a country with a billion-dollar defense budget. No, this shock comes from a nation barely anyone talks about in military terms, a country most people outside Asia can't even point to on a map. And yet, here we are in 2025, watching this tiny, quiet nation unleash something so unexpected, so precise, and so brilliantly engineered that for the first time in years, American analysts are publicly admitting they didn't see this coming, not even close. Before we break this down, let me warn you, do not blink, because the moment this video starts getting shared worldwide, the story will explode. And if you're watching right now, you're early. You're in the front row of a geopolitical plot twist that nobody thought possible. So grab your seat, because what Laos just unveiled isn't just a weapon, it's a message, a blueprint, and a statement that small countries are done playing by the old rules. Let's go straight into the shockwave. Imagine a weapon designed not to compete with American or Chinese systems head-on, but to slip right through the gaps they didn't pay attention to. Imagine a system created on a budget so low it looks like a mistake. Imagine something so adaptable and so cost-efficient that even defense specialists in Washington had to recheck the data twice before believing it. That's exactly what Laos has done. A customized, hybrid, asymmetric smart strike platform built for the terrain of Southeast Asia, but capable of reshaping how small nations defend themselves everywhere. And the crazy part, it wasn't built in some underground mega facility, not funded by billions, not backed by a superpower. It was built with ingenuity, necessity, and a strategy so bold that it's now being dissected inside Pentagon briefing rooms. So what is this thing actually? Let's break down what's publicly known, because trust me, a lot is still classified. What analysts agree on is that Laos has built a 2025 integrated mobility strike weapon using 3 elements: locally manufactured micro-guided munitions, AI-assisted targeting modules sourced from open architecture tech, and a new generation of ultralight, ultra-silent platforms that blend into terrain like they don't even exist. It's half drone, half smart artillery, half electronic ghost. Yes, that's 3 halves, because this system doesn't play by normal mathematics. It breaks rules, bends expectations, and slips into the blind spot of every traditional defense doctrine. The real twist, the cost per unit is shockingly low. So low that American analysts are calling it the most cost-efficient disruptive weapon of 2025. The phrase that went viral in defense circles was, "It is not the weapon you fear, it's the volume." Because when you can produce something powerful, precise, and stealthy at a fraction of the cost of conventional systems, quantity becomes its own kind of deterrence. And Laos figured that out. This didn't happen overnight. Laos isn't a rich country. It's a landlocked nation with mountains, forests, and long-standing strategic challenges. But sometimes limitations create breakthroughs. When you can't afford the big toys, you invent smarter ones. When you can't buy the most advanced weapons, you engineer what nobody expects. And that's exactly where the Laos 2025 weapon becomes terrifyingly effective. It doesn't need to compete with F-35S. It doesn't need to replace major missile systems. It simply needs to give Laos a defensive edge that makes any aggressor think twice, hesitate, or reconsider. Let me paint a picture for you. You're a reconnaissance unit approaching a region in northern Laos. You're expecting a traditional ground defense that took maybe artillery positions, maybe observation posts, and then suddenly, out of nowhere, a coordinated swarm of low-cost precision platforms quietly activates. Not loud, not visible, not traceable in any conventional sense. They track, they assign targets automatically, they reposition using Laos' difficult terrain as their shield, and within seconds, they disable your advance. Not with huge explosions, not with dramatic visuals, no, clean, precise, quiet, shockingly effective strikes that come from platforms so small and so cheap that trying to destroy them costs more than they do. That is the future Laos has just stepped into. And this is where the concern comes in. It's not that Laos suddenly became a world military power. It's not that Laos has built something that can challenge American systems directly. No more. The real reason Washington is paying attention is because Laos just proved a concept. The nation without money, without global influence, and without a massive military industry can still create disruptive weapons capable of reshaping regional balance. If Laos can do this with limited resources, what happens when nations with more money and similar motivations follow? What happens when 10 small countries adopt this model? What happens when insurgent groups try to replicate the technology? What happens when defense becomes cheap, autonomous, decentralized, and almost impossible to counter with traditional force? That's why the Pentagon is rattled, not because Laos is threatening anyone, but because the strategy behind the weapon is revolutionary. The engineering approach is almost poetic, using open-source frameworks the world ignored, integrating quiet propulsion systems developed for civilian use, adapting communication modules designed originally for agriculture drones, converting terrain mapping software used by hikers into battlefield analytics, and then wrapping all of that with AI-assisted firing algorithms optimized for rugged environments. It's simple, it's brilliant, it's terrifyingly effective, and it's everything modern militaries never prepared for. Let's talk about the reaction across Asia, Vietnam, Thailand, Cambodia. Every one of them is recalibrating. You don't ignore a neighbor that suddenly demonstrates asymmetric capability. Even if Laos insists it's purely defensive and so far, that's exactly what it appears. The strategic landscape around the Mekong has permanently changed. Military planners in the region now have to ask themselves, how do you counter something that doesn't follow any pattern? How do you stop a system that is cheap enough to deploy everywhere but smart enough to strike with precision? How do you prepare for something that blends with jungle terrain, masks itself electronically, and acts like a ghost with a trigger? But the biggest reaction isn't coming from Asia. It is coming from internet audiences across the world who are stunned that a country so small and so quiet just delivered one of the biggest military surprises of the decade. People are drawn to underdog stories. They're fascinated by game-changing inventions. And in a world dominated by giant countries and giant budgets, a small nation shaking the table is the kind of story that spreads like wildfire. That's why this video is exploding. That's why your comments are already pouring in. And that's why everyone from analysts to ordinary viewers is now obsessed with Laos 2025 weapon. Now let me take you deeper. There's something hidden beneath the story, something more important than the weapon itself. It's the rise of a new era where ideas matter more than money, where creativity defeats scale, where innovation outmaneuvers tradition. Laos didn't create this weapon to intimidate the world. They created it to protect themselves, to redefine their own defense strategy, and to prove that military relevance doesn't belong only to superpowers. And whether the Pentagon likes it or not, the world is shifting. Small nations are learning that the old rules no longer apply. You can't rely on size. You can't rely on budget. You can't even rely on traditional training. Modern warfare belongs to those who think differently. And this time, the different thinker was Laos. As this technology spreads, expect dramatic ripple effects. Expect alliances to adjust. Expect debates in Congress. Expect new military contracts. Expect a race between nations to develop countermeasures. But most importantly, expect the story to keep growing. Because you're not just watching a weapon review, you're witnessing a moment that will appear in future military documentaries. A moment where a single country quietly proved that innovation doesn't care about GDP. And before we close, I want you to think about this. If Laos can do this with limited resources, what other breakthroughs are already being developed in places we never pay attention to? What new systems are being built in small labs, on limited budgets, by people with ideas that could shake global stability? What else is coming in 2025, 2026, 2027? You're watching history unfold. You're ahead of the crowd. And if you want to stay ahead, if you want to catch every story the moment it breaks, make sure you subscribe right now. Because the next reveal might be even bigger. And with all that said, here are the final words the two analysts are repeating today, the same words echoing across military forums, intelligence discussions, and the defense channels worldwide. America can't believe this new weapon just appeared.